to this special edition of Tech 24 out of the International Forum on Cybersecurity that's being held in the French northern city of Lille. According to several reports, 2020 was a record-breaking year for cybercrime, with the FBI reporting a 70% increase in the number of submissions to its hotline, a trend replicated globally. Since the beginning of 2021, we've also seen a spike in the number of ransomware attacks. Experts say that they're becoming more sophisticated and that the range of targets has expanded to government agencies and critical infrastructure providers. Let's take a look back on the greatest attacks in the last few months.
The first 8 months of this year alone saw at least 95 known cyber attacks, according to the Center for Strategic and International Studies. The hacks have targeted government agencies, infrastructure, and private companies, often in the form of ransomware attacks. Cybersecurity experts and even world leaders warn that such attacks pose one of the biggest threats to national and economic security.
If we end up in a war, a real shooting war, with a major power, it's going to be as a consequence of a cyber breach of great consequence. And it's increasing exponentially, the capabilities.
One of the biggest ransomware attacks in 2021 targeted Colonial Pipeline. The hack took down one of the largest fuel pipelines in the U.S., causing major disruptions for several days. The company paid nearly $4.5 million in ransom to DarkSide, a hacking group believed to be based in Eastern Europe or Russia, although the FBI was able to recover roughly half the sum. Another major attack revealed this year hit U.S. IT firm SolarWinds. Malicious code was downloaded by roughly 18,000 SolarWinds customers, according to the company's CEO. A sign that ransomware attacks are becoming more advanced and aggressive, says the top U.S. cybersecurity official who testified before Congress back in May.
The SolarWinds supply chain compromise should have served as a wake-up call to our adversaries' increasing interest in targeting supply chain vulnerabilities. This highly sophisticated operation, attributed to the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, the SVR, involved the compromise of trusted software updates to inject malicious code into thousands of victim organizations.
A Russian-speaking cybercrime group, Revil, has been behind other major ransomware attacks this year. It targeted JBS Foods, one of the world's largest meat processing companies, forcing it to shut down most operations in North America and Australia, and prompting JBS to pay $11 million in ransom.
Another cyber threat that is often overlooked is a straightforward technical issue. The collapse of the internet, for instance, has been predicted many times before as the number of users increases exponentially and the world becomes even more interconnected. Such a collapse could have devastating consequences globally. Let's listen in to Nick Merrill from Berkeley University.
So the internet is a lot more fragile than most people think it is, primarily because it wasn't designed to be used at the scale that we currently use it. And we've known about this for a really long time, but upgrading the internet can be a slow process. And it can also be quite political, especially in an internet that is, on one hand, hegemonically dominated by US corporations, and on the other, increasingly splintering into national internets in places like Russia, China, and in some ways even the EU. So we have an increasingly fragile internet in an increasingly unstable political world. Now, for an idea of what internet instability might feel like, imagine that you try to use your credit card, but it doesn't work. In fact, no one's credit card is working. And you try to access the news to find out why, but that doesn't work either. So chaos ensues, people smash ATMs and empty them of cash, and if this continues long enough, global systems of trade disintegrate. Ships don't know where to dock or what to pick up when they get there. Now, while this kind of catastrophic internet meltdown remains unlikely, it's both more likely than it should be and also hard to estimate the exact likelihood of, in part because we don't have good structural models of the internet, which is what I work on. Now, on the bright side, there is increasing research interest in this area. So similar to how scientists built models of the climate in the 1960s and 70s, we hope to build models of the internet that will allow us to both stave off disaster and also shepherd a stable and global internet into the future.
Cyberspace has become the new battleground for nations to confront one another. They're engaging in attacks for the purpose of espionage or misinformation using new types of weapons, but also asymmetrical capabilities. So far, all negotiations have stalled to create an international treaty. Well, to talk more about it, let's welcome Ivan Kwiatkowski. Thank you very much for being with us. You're a security researcher at Kaspersky. Thank you. My first question to you would be, we're seeing that there's more and more cyber attacks since the beginning of 2021. We're seeing that some states are engaging in attacks. They're using new types of weapons. We're seeing, for instance, China, but also Russia engaging in such attacks. What are we witnessing in cyberspace for those who are watching us?
So I think that a key point to understand is that cyberspace has become a new battleground and states are engaging with each other constantly in cyberspace. But as far as we can tell, it's mostly for intelligence gathering purposes. So what this means is that states are breaking into computers of foreign companies or foreign governments in order to steal files, steal information about new technologies, about military capabilities, and so on. At the moment, we have seen a limited number or marginal number of maybe sabotage operations where they use their access through the cyberspace into maybe power plants or other types of industries in order to destroy machinery or provoke explosions. But basically, we really believe that these are fundamentally experimentations, and at the moment this really hasn't broken into like the real arsenal of war that might be used by states. So we wouldn't say that those cyber attacks have a risk of escalating into military conflict. However, one thing that is certain is that for every armed conflict that is happening nowadays, but also for all the future ones, there is obviously going to be a cyber component to it.
Some experts, however, have said that we could experience a cyber Pearl Harbor or a cyber 9/11 in the years to come. What's your opinion on this?
I would tend to disagree with this analysis. So when we think of Pearl Harbor, we think about an attack that would lead then to a military conflict, right? But I do not think that this is something that could happen. There have been cyber attacks going on for years now, and it appears that all of them have been deemed to remain below the bar for an act of war, right? What I do believe, though, is that for every future conflict, there will be a cyber component. And then whenever a military conflict is going to break out, then there will be a cyber component to it. However, I do not think that a cyber attack is going to escalate into a war.
Now, it's been 20 years since 9/11, and the cyber terrorist threat is up there in the list of cyber threats. How realistic is it today?
I think it's somewhat realistic, but also not that critical. What I mean by this is that the terrorist groups that we know of do not have that many capabilities. Organizing cyber attacks is a complex task. They need technology. They need people who are able to perform the cyber attacks. They need financial means to maybe purchase the vulnerability that they will be using. And we do not believe that these terrorist groups,
like the Islamic State?
Yeah, we do not believe them currently to have anywhere close to those capabilities. However, we think that they might be able to organize cyber attacks that would be comparable to the ones that are organized by, for instance, the cyber criminals. We hear about the ransomware attacks all the time in the media, and of course, these attacks are tragic for their victims. But at the same time, they do not cause human casualties. And in this regard, I think that even if terrorist groups were to ever organize such attacks, it would not be even close to the damage they can cause through the violent means that they are currently using.
In the physical environment.
Exactly.
Ivan Kwiatkowski, thank you very much indeed for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's often said that the weakest link in the cybersecurity chain is the user, but in just a minute, Peter O'Brien, who's in the studio, is set to tell you how you can become a safer user and avoid being trapped by spam and phishing mails.
Well, the first thing to admit, Julia, is that there's absolutely no shame in getting phished. I myself was a victim recently. In fact, phishing attacks are now extremely convincing. Research has shown that the vast majority of people are unable to identify sophisticated phishing emails, and the blatantly obvious scams have just lulled us into a false sense of knowing what's a scam and what's not. So how can we avoid the more subtle ones? Well, first of all, be suspicious of any email you receive which has a sense of urgency. Maybe there's something to be cancelled, or you owe money, or a delivery is due. It's telling you to act right now. Let me show you some of the most common words that you see in the subject line. So it could be a thing like urgent, payment, or request. Now, the body of the email will often look sloppy. Look out for bad grammar or spelling or strange formatting. This, in fact, is the email trying to get through the spam filters. Carefully check the email address to see if it looks strange, and if in doubt, don't click any links. You can always hover over them to check if the URL matches the official one, but it's usually best to go to the official website and log in that way rather than click the link. That's it from me on how to stay safe online. Back to you, Julia.
Thank you very much, Peter, for that. That brings us to the end of this week's edition of Tech 24. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you soon.